Hello, welcome to the podcast, Human Rights in America, a Revolutionary Mindset. I am your host, Sue Young. Episode 19, Environmental Law and Human Rights. In the last episode, I talked about leftover DEI information. Let's go play on leftovers from Thanksgiving. Basically, I was just reiterating that my decision to talk about DEI doesn't stem from jumping on the bandwagon. It reflects a memory, a prior experience dating all the way back to my law school days when me and a couple of other law school students formed Diversity Awareness Week. I had forgotten about that experience, and it was pretty revolutionary then because I won an award for the most innovative law school program that year. Thank you, Cousin Kelly, for reminding me to state my accomplishments. Okay, moving on. Last Tuesday, December 10th, was Human Rights Day. Sadly, I wasn't overwhelmed by people posting about Human Rights Day because the Initiative for Human Rights started shortly after the Declaration was passed in 1948. Yeah, it really hasn't caught on. At least I haven't seen it. Yes, I know that organizations that are involved with human rights probably posted about it, but everyone should be posting about it. It's like Earth Day or International Women's Day. Earth Day started in 1970, and I can say it probably wasn't until 1990 that I finally caught on, just like International Women's Day. Women's Day was started in 1975 by the United Nations to recognize women for their achievements. But to me, it's not really celebrated to the degree that I think it should in America. Maybe that's what it's going to take for Human Rights Day to catch on. It's funny, we can celebrate President's Day, Memorial Day, Martin Luther King Day, and all those other days, but they were all accomplished by humans. So we should definitely be celebrating Human Rights Day like the day that it is. But I have a human rights podcast, so I may be a little biased. Before we get into the next topic, I just want to tell you I'm on this kick to learn something new. So this week, I'm addressing environmental law as it pertains to human rights. And just to get started, I always like to reference the article in the Declaration. But guess what? There is not a specific article that addresses the environment in the Declaration. Rather, information from the United Nations Development Group, which is a group of entities to support sustainable development, states, and I quote, "The human rights framework provides an unassailable moral and legal justification for immediate and urgent action to protect the environment for the benefit of all persons. Environmental sustainability and the protection and fulfillment of human rights are complementary objectives at the core of sustainable development. Ecosystems and the services they provide directly contribute to the full environmental enjoyment of human rights. Businesses have a responsibility to respect human rights, do no harm, and exercise due diligence in carrying out their activities. In the event that environmental and human rights harm occurs, both states and businesses have obligations to ensure access to effective remedies. Significant number of court cases, national constitutions and legislation, and international instruments have all acknowledged the close linkages between environmental and human rights law. Additionally, international human rights mechanisms address environmental aspects of a number of human rights, including the right to life, religion, property, health, water, food, and culture. On occasion, they have addressed the right to a healthy environment directly, but mainly they have focused on the environment dimensions of more established rights. The environmental issues such as climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, and ecosystem management, and principles such as solidarity, accountability, transparency, equity, and justice requires an international coordinated response based on common human rights. Long story short, I think all of this means that even though there isn't a specific right in the Declaration of 1948 for the environment, there is much agreement within international countries and communities in understanding that human rights are tied to the environment because of their culture implications, religious implications, and biodiversity pollution issues. Those issues can only be addressed as it pertains to the very people that it affects, which is humans. It's kind of like our Declaration of Independence. It says, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To me, we all inherently feel what those words mean, yet we may or may not all agree on what life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness entails. So I get it. In an article dated April 9th, 2024, Europe's top human rights court said that the Swiss government had violated its citizens' human rights by not doing enough to stop climate change. It's noted as a landmark ruling that experts said could bolster activists hoping to use human rights law to hold governments to account. In this case, which was brought by a group called Senior Women for the Environment Protection, the European Court on Human Rights in Strasbourg, France, said that Switzerland had failed to meet its target in reducing carbon emissions, so they must address the shortcoming. The women, aged 64 and up, said that it was a health risk to them during heat waves related to global warming. The Swiss government violated their rights by not doing enough to mitigate against global warming. Closer home in America, in an article dated August 14th, 2023, in a case called Held versus Montana, a judge sides with young activists in the first climate trial. The state agencies were violating constitutional rights by permitting fossil fuel development. The ruling is the first of its kind in the United States, which joins a small number of legal decisions around the world that have established a government duty to protect citizens from climate change. The policy used by the state in evaluating fossil fuel permits does not allow agencies to evaluate the effects of greenhouse gas emissions, which is unconstitutional. Montana's emissions and climate change have been proven to be a substantial factor in causing climate impacts to Montana's environment and harm and injury to the youth. However, it's up to the state legislature to determine how to bring the policy into compliance. As of July 10th, 2024, the Montana Supreme Court has taken the case up after hearing oral arguments. The executive director of Our Children's Trust in Oregon Environmental Group that has filed similar lawsuits in every state since 2011 states, as fires rage in the West, fueled by fossil fuel pollution, today's ruling is a game changer and marks a turning point in this generation's effort to save the planet from the devastating effects of human caused climate chaos. On the other hand, Emily Flower, a spokesperson for the Montana Attorney General, decried the ruling as absurd. She criticized the judge for allowing the plaintiffs to put on what she called a taxpayer funded publicity stunt. She said Montanans can't be blamed for changing the climate. The same legal theory has been thrown out of federal courts in more than a dozen states. It should have been here as well. But they found an ideological judge who bent over backwards to allow the case to move forward and earn a spot in their next documentary. Increasing carbon dioxide emissions are driving hotter temperatures, resulting in more droughts and wildfires and decreased snowpack. Those changes were harming their mental and physical health, with wildfire smoke choking the air they breathe and droughts drying out the rivers that sustain agriculture, fish, wildlife, and recreation. Native Americans testifying for the plaintiffs said climate change affects their ceremonies and traditional food source. The state argued that even if Montana stopped producing carbon dioxide, it would have no effect on a global scale because states and countries around the world contribute to the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. Your remedy has to offer relief or it's not a remedy at all. This is interesting because the state stated that the judge was ideological. Words are important here because ideological at one stage can become forward thinking and an innovator in the next breath. The state's second issue is that even if Montana stops CO2, the world may still be at a deficit. There's no adequate remedy. Notice the state didn't say that Montanans wouldn't be breathing better air and may have less droughts if they curb their CO2 output. In an article from August 2023, does it matter how much the U.S. reduces its carbon dioxide emissions if China doesn't do the same? Author Micheline Scott, a science writer with the National Snow and Ice Data Center in Colorado, states, it matters because from a purely physical perspective, any reduction in emissions helps minimize future temperature increases. From the perspectives of fairness, the United States has released more heat-trapping gases to date either than China or India, the world's two most populous countries. Since carbon dioxide is a long-lived greenhouse gas that can linger in the Earth's atmosphere for thousands of years, the United States bears more responsibility for the amount of warming that has occurred so far and will persist for millennia. Every reduction is better than no reduction. We don't know that Montanans or that these plaintiffs would or would not benefit from their state efforts in reducing greenhouse gases. The state Supreme Court has the case. We'll have to wait to see what they decide. Here's a thought while you wait. Just because an ideal isn't trendy now doesn't mean that it won't be in the future. Take pollution, freeing the slaves, or allowing women the right to vote or own property. At one time, the thinking was slanted one way, but then it changed. So maybe, just maybe, an ideological judge today will become the great change maker of tomorrow. The United States is a party, along with close to 200 other countries, to the 2015 Paris Agreement, which aims to limit the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius. To meet these goals, humans can emit only so much more carbon dioxide, whether through fossil fuel burning, cement production, or land use change. That's interesting because our president elect aims to withdraw from the Paris Agreement for a second time and increase fossil fuel use in this country. In closing, here's an AI generated poem that I titled, Who Cares? The ice caps weep a silent tear as oceans rise, their waters near. The forests shrink and tall, a fading echo, nature's call. The skies grow dim, a hazy veil, where once the sun so bright would sail. The creatures flee, their homes undone, a symphony of life nearly gone. And I saw this on Facebook. The quote says, imagine if trees gave off Wi Fi signals. We would be planting so many trees and we'd probably save the planet too. Too bad they only produce the oxygen we breathe. Until next time, be revolutionary, be human.